share my screen.
So, hey, Gary, Swallow, do everybody need to be on Parts Finder now, or just going to do the presentation?
Right, I'm assuming we've all proven we can open it. So,
Okay.
so if we can,
Don't worry about it right now.
Don't worry about it right now, rather than all the trying to do it. Obviously, if you want to follow along, feel free. But yeah, I'll drive the system from this end just to sort of show exactly what I'm talking about. Like I say, if you want to sort of play with it as we're doing it, you won't get lost. So.
So you say you want to follow along, go ahead.
Right, so yeah, I'm just going to do a basic introduction to the 3D Parts Finder system itself. It's not going to be too in-depth, because obviously that's going to follow with Bob teaching you a bit more about the fixtures and that sort of thing. But this is just going to sort of get you used to using this nice little sort of niche bit of software that we've adopted for a certain purpose. The software itself, it's actually made by the company that makes SolidWorks, which is the full CAD design program that our R&D teams use globally to actually design these products in the prototype staging and that sort of things. Once they have made their final designs and sent it off to production and that sort of thing, we can then take that final model and utilize it for service and support use, and for easily tracking part numbers and well, primarily for tracking part numbers, but also it's quite a good aid from a service and support side of things to see how it goes together. Basically, if you don't have a physical fixture with you, you can use this as a virtual fixture to sort of pull apart and just have a look at, especially if you're on the phone to someone and they're asking questions and you can't quite picture that model. You can literally bring it up in front of you and play with it, just to refresh your memory. So historically, obviously most parts lists and things are either just a table of parts lists, or the old faithful exploded static diagram like this one here. This is our exterior 1000 architectural light fitting. But because of the way these are made, obviously it's an exploded diagram, but it doesn't really tell you how it fits together. And again, you can't move it really. Obviously, you can zoom in and zoom out on a PDF, but the only way that we can show you individual sections is by a longer PDF file, like this entire sort of middle section here. If you can see my mouse moving, this entire section here is the sort of internal section where all of the different colours and the gobos, I heard you were talking about gobos earlier, and all the actual sort of motors and things that make things happen are all in this central module. So as you sort of go down, you can then sort of break apart these modules, but again, they're all slightly confusing. You can't really tell how these things are slotted together and how they look in the real world. So whilst they are still helpful, they're not as helpful as they could be. And this is where the 3D Parts Finder comes in, because that then gives us a 3D representation that we can manipulate to whatever angle, zoom level, explosion level that we want, and we can move around this. So from a tech support side of things, of explaining to someone, you can literally say, oh, it's this bit that's sat next to this bit, and if you move that bit out of the way, it's behind there, which obviously from a 3D, from a standard exploded diagram, you can't really explain that. But this way you can virtually have a product in front of you. So this software is basically it's the Composer player. The Composer itself is the software that I use to create these things, and the player is purely a read-only playback device of how I want you to see it, I think is the best way of putting it. On the left-hand side, we have some views, and these are views that I have generated, and these become shortcuts, basically, to certain levels of entry into this model. The way I've made this slide, which I hope you've all got, think of it like an interactive PowerPoint thing. in this particular one. So the software itself doesn't require as high a spec hardware like laptop or PC as the full SolidWorks 3D programming. You don't need all the knowledge of how to use a 3D CAD program because you are purely manipulating something that's already created. So it's not as scary as you initially think because you aren't creating anything, you're just manipulating something that's already been done. So the software itself, you can either double click one of the files or open the thing up and then open the file from there. So you can see from this one, I've set up some little shortcuts and things and various speech bubbles and things just to explain how this software actually gets used. The actual fixtures on this side here, as you can see, as I move my mouse over them, things start to highlight. This is an integral part of the tool, which allows me to highlight specific parts, and they also can become hyperlinks as well. So you can click on a highlighted part and dig further into that selection. On the left-hand side, I've got various things just to help you navigate. You know, what do the mouse clicks do? What do you have to press to get things to happen? So obviously you can refer back to this at any given point. And I sort of keep this across all of these different views for this exact training purpose. But this model here, it looks like a photo, but if I was to right click and move the mouse, I can rotate the actual model itself. So I can get different angles. As I let go, it stays in that angle that I have left. Obviously I can zoom in and out on things. As you can see, the text doesn't move, but the model does. So I can manipulate and move in, and I can sort of change things around. If I middle click, I can drag without changing the angles to sort of center it on my page. So I can sort of get into exactly where I want to be. So say I wanted to get into the middle of this fixture here, I can sort of scroll right in and then manipulate it to be wherever I need it to be. And from that point, I can even sort of rotate it and see, you know, different angles and things. So full manipulation of the model in a 3D space. And if you ever get to a stage where you're upside down and not knowing where you are, the shortcuts that I present here, if you click on one of those, it just takes you back to that reset view. So this here is quickly showing 4 of the types of fixtures that Martin do. We have fixtures that do movement, as in physical pan and tilt, and some that don't. Like the ELP PAR here is a fixed product that has no automated movement control. You have to manually undo the hand wheels and adjust the angles that you want and then lock it back off again. But internally, there are motors that move, like the zoom function, for instance. The Atomic 3000 LED unit here has no moving parts at all inside. There's no motors that change anything. It is purely LEDs. And again, you have a manual wheel on the side to adjust the angles. The moving headlights, like the Mac Aura here and the Era down here, these ones have full automation of pan, tilt, and internal motors for zoom, color controls, that sort of thing. So different types of fixtures. Some of them obviously have less parts inside. The ones that have no moving parts are just a few circuit boards, so they're a simpler model to navigate. The ones that are a base unit and a yoke and a head obviously have a lot more parts inside them, so they end up being a much larger file to navigate with a lot more views inside as you explode the different levels to get to where the parts that you need to be. So as an example, in this one, I chose the Era 300 profile because it's quite a simple unit as far as a moving head goes. But in this case, I'm going to hover over it and just left click, and you can see it's then automatically moving to my next view, which, as you see here on this left-hand side, is now highlighting that view. I can double click each one and it just resets to whichever view. Obviously, as you're working through, it's easier to sort of point and click at what you're looking at to get the same change. So the way the 3D Parts Finder is set up is we tend to have these little call out things here, just to sort of highlight what we're looking at in this exact view. We're not going to explode the entire model into 1,000 different parts and try and confuse you in one view. We try and simplify it so that you can home into where you want to be looking at without all of the parts getting in the way and sort of clashing with the information that you're trying to achieve. So each of these I've set up as a little hotspot itself. So rather than the full fixture, we've now split it into 3 items: the base unit, the yoke assembly, and the head assembly. So now if I was to click one of these, it takes me to just the head assembly. So now I've taken the base and the yoke out of the equation. They're not going to confuse me and get in the way as I rotate this model. The base isn't going to get in the way of my view or anything like that. Obviously, I'm not going to read all this text to you. It's there for your consumption at your own time. But this is how we would normally start a explosion. We would start by peeling the covers off rather than exploding everything in one go. We would virtually take it apart as if you were physically taking it apart. And each part that we take off, if I hover over that now, we now see a part number. So at this level of explosion, I'm giving you the part numbers for the covers. So if that was all you needed, then that's as far as you need to go in the model. You don't need to click anything else and go any further. The main body, any part that's in there, I'm not giving you the part number for yet because we haven't got there yet. We don't need that information. It just saves having a lot of these little call-outs appearing everywhere on the screen. So we're trying to give you a simplified look in a consistent manner and in a way that makes sense as you would virtually take the machine apart. So those covers come off first. Once they're off, I can then click onto that main unit, and that's then going to separate that a little bit further. So again, I'm not exploding the entire thing into 1,000 more parts. I've broken it down into the individual modules that are in this unit. So front lens parts, for instance, come off quite easily. So each of those has its own part. Obviously, you wouldn't normally have any of this text in the background. It would just be a white background, so you wouldn't have that in the way. But again, you can zoom in, you can move around, you can pan it across and manipulate to where you need to be. And if you hover over, it's going to give you a part number. So that's as simple as that for those 3 parts. This part here does not have a call out because it is not an available part to purchase. That part underneath it does. So again, if I was to manipulate that so I can see it better, that lens has a part number. So certain parts do not have a call out because they are not an available spare part. It may be that it's part of a larger assembly that you'd have to purchase, in which case the part number would have already been given in the larger assembly system. It's like these here. We have 2 modules here. This one is the CMY color wheel modules. That just comes out of the unit, 2 screws, and that slides out. So that one module there, we would explode that further into the individual parts, or it may be available as the complete module. Above that, we have more color wheels. If I pan it around and have a look, you can see there are gobos in this wheel. Let me get a better angle. So this wheel here has several color things. Sorry, it's highlighting green obviously because I'm hovering over it. But this has the color wheels themselves and the individual gobos, the little bits of glass. So as a module, again, this comes out 2 screws and it slides out for easy testing and replacement. But we can then take this further apart and order the individual bits of glass for the gobos, the different patterns and things. So I don't explode it any further in this file, but you would explode and get just that information. If I quickly go to the folder structure, I shall show you that better. 3D Parts Finder comes in 2 zip files currently. We have one which is the current products, which is the current active selling products that we sell. And then legacy is everything that is discontinued either recently or 10 years ago or however long we've got. The products obviously, as they become discontinued, they get moved to the legacy for reference purposes. But if I go into the current one and into content, we have our channels of sort of sub-brand in Martin. We have the Rush lighting, we have the LED videos like the P3 controllers and things. Entertainment lighting tends to be most of the Mac products, the atmospheric effects is smoke machines, and the architainment is our architectural lighting, which are all they're not moving head products. They are fixed ones, just a light beam to make the outside of your building look quite nice. So if I was to go into the atmospheric effects, the entertainment lighting, here we have things like the Mac Aura, your XP, the PXL, the Allures, the Encores. Something you will see here is some of them are a single file for a complete product. And then as we get more complex into the more expensive higher end models, we split them into a base, a head, and a yoke as individual files because of how many parts and moving things are in there. Rather than making one massive file, we split them already. It just makes it less taxing on your hardware when you open things up. And we've also got things like the Mac Encore has different variations. There is a performance and there is a wash variant. So the common parts are the yoke and the base. So they share a file, but where they are different, we then split them into the head, rear end, the performance multi-module, the wash multi-module, just so it's not confusing trying to fit multiple products into one file. If I was to open up the multi-module of the Mac Encore, for instance, so again, this is a module that just slides out of the main head of the unit. So where we had before, like this one here, where we have the main head, the module slides out. This one here is quite a complicated version of that from one of our high-end lighting fixtures. So again, I can manipulate and move around. I can see how things are bolted together. Like there's a bolt there that holds that top plate to the next plate. So from a service point of view, I can see how it is actually assembled, and I can look around and just see how it goes together and remind myself how things are. If I wanted to know the part number of that motor, I can click on that motor and it will separate into the next evolution of explosion. How would you get to that stage? So in this case, we split it into 3 pieces. I still want that motor, so I'm going to click on that motor again. And now that complete part of this assembly has a part number in this bottom left-hand corner. So I can purchase that as it is there. If I still want the motor, I can click on the motor further, and you'll see it now becomes separated from the rest. And now I can hover over the motor, and it gives me the part number. At any given point, I can click back on these and reassemble. So I can just say yes, okay, that motor shaft itself has a toothed wheel on the end of it, and it has a bolt through the end of it. What's the part number of that one? Do I need that as well? If I break it apart again, I know that wheel, if I bring it center, I'll hover over, that's the part number for the wheel. You can see how these things are sort of put together and how you can logically sort of move through a product to get to what you want, especially if you have a customer trying to explain, not necessarily in the correct technical terms to you, but if they were saying it's the second motor from the left on this module here, you can bring the module up and you can sort of walk through their thought process as they're trying to explain it to you. You can say, oh yes, I know it's that motor there, it's next to the sensor PCB. If that's the one that you mean, we can get into there and I can quickly go to that one and bring it up further. And as it explodes, I can zoom in, I can manipulate around it, say they wanted the motor and the space underneath. So the motor itself, there's the part number. The spacer that's underneath it, there's the part number. So you're encapsulating what they're trying to tell you and putting it into a visual aid so you can follow what they're trying to tell you. Yeah, so that's basically what we do and how we sort of use this system. Some products can explode further because we do offer more parts for that one. The more expensive high-end ones that we make within the Harman manufacturing itself, we tend to offer more parts for, purely because we make it ourselves. some of the other products, like the Rush product brands that we have in the Era, these are actually made by third parties in China and that sort of thing. So because we don't manufacture them ourselves, we don't offer all of the individual parts and screws that we would normally for one of our own products. So some of them are a bit limited, but that's exactly how and why we actually do it. We do it so that when you have a module like this from one of the units, if it doesn't give you the part numbers for the individual parts, you would have to buy the full module. But it actually tends to be a cheaper option compared to one of our more expensive lights, where buying the full module would be thousands of dollars, for instance. So there's certain decisions at the spare part level that are made, and we try and reflect that in this 3D Parts Finder by either telling you specifically you have to buy this module, or we can give you the individual part numbers of the individual parts that make up that module, because that's what we decided when we set the spare parts up. I will say that 3D Parts Finder is not 100% accurate every single time. There may be parts where when we made the 3D Parts Finder, we didn't have that part set up as a spare part number, but we have since changed that, in which case the next revision of the 3D Parts Finder that's released should have been updated to include that part. So obviously keeping 3D Parts Finder up to date is advised, but we don't obviously release new versions every 2-3 months. It tends to be about once a year that we go through and just correct any errors, adjust any part numbers that need adjusting, remove part numbers if we can no longer get the individual part, and then obviously make it obvious that you have to buy a higher level sub-assembly that includes that part instead. Yeah, so that's pretty much it, I think.
Hey, Gary, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, go on. So you can hear me, Bob? You can hear me? I don't know. Yeah, Gary, the non-orderable parts thing is down in the left corner of this thing, right? Not all the parts are orderable. Non-orderable.
Yeah, one of the things, sorry, wrong one. One of the things that we have is the view area in this middle bit here is obviously what we are trying to show you. One of the side effects of this exact bit of software that we cannot control is if I hover over a part, you will see in the very bottom left-hand corner, it now says press tab to temporarily hide it, and it has a part number there. Now, we're trying to make it so that that part number in the bottom left is the correct part number. Now, some items on the older 3D Parts Finder files that have been made historically may have a wrong number there because of how the model was made. The pop-up speech bubble thing that appears over the actual screen is something that we do have control of. The bottom left-hand corner is the sort of raw file behind that, how that part's been named in the model. So sometimes you may have conflicting information there. If I was to choose one of the older, excuse me, like the Mac Viper, I think might have some older things in it. Yeah, so hovering over this cover here, in my main view, I'm not giving you the part number yet, but in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see it says 6240-9808-B-2. Now, the -B-2 is not part of this part number. That is internal R&D references of revisions and model revisions that they've made. They may have multiple versions of this same part in the same model. They're just hiding them from public view, but they've left that as the name. So sometimes that bottom left-hand corner is more confusing than anything else.
Yeah, but sometimes it'll say non-orderable, right? There's a lot of mechanisms in there.
Yes, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to override what it says in the bottom corner, so it doesn't say that -B-2. It actually says
so maybe
non-orderable.
Yeah, maybe highlight one that says uses the words non-orderable.
If I can find one in
like
here.
Any one of these, yeah. There's some.
Yeah, it might be.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's good to know that because then you don't have to keep looking. It'll be non-orderable.
Yeah.
Like some of these plates and this one's the Viper's got most everything.
Yeah, obviously mostly. Let me find. Yeah, let me find one of the era.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Okay. Then they could stop hunting, it's not orderable.
Yeah, I'll ask the question later. I'm just kind of curious what the message is. Like, sir, that's not unorderable. So
Then you
what am
go
I
to
saying?
a bigger mechanism, like a bigger assembly.
Okay.
So the parts people trying to find that part, go non-orderable, we gotta go bigger.
Yeah. So here's one.
So you mean the line itself?
Well,
If
no,
anything is disposable.
it'll be a bigger mechanism, bigger assembly.
Okay, always.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Okay.
this is a good example here. Something we will also try and do is, if it's non-orderable, we'll try and make it slightly ghosted, so it doesn't look the same as the other parts. So this here is, again, it's a multi-module from the Era 600. So obviously it's got all the color wheels and the gobos in it. So as a full module, it has a part number. So you can order this entire package. If I wanted this toothed wheel here from it,
This is a non-orderable item in the bottom
there's
left.
that. If I click on it, you'll see it goes.
So you don't waste time.
It goes
Trying to
ghosted
figure it out.
now. So the reason we've done this is because some of these parts you can still order. So we still want the explosion, but we're hiding certain parts, like that one there. That toothed wheel there has gone ghosted.
Right, non-orderable.
And it says non-orderable in the bottom corner, and it doesn't give you a pop-up to say what the part number is. So we're trying to control this now, and we are slowly going through the older ones to clean them up to do this, so that we aren't giving you part numbers that no longer exist or anything like that. But yeah, so anything that's gone ghosted here, obviously the glass is see-through anyway, so the glass is the glass. But things like this arm here, if I was to rotate that, in fact, let me start from this level again. You can see that it is now a solid black color. So at this stage you can see it, so it's not, looking confusing as you look at the model itself. But if I was to click onto that, it will make it now a ghosted see-through item.
And the only way to get that item is to order the modules, certain parts.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, you would have to go up one level, which is back to that level there, and you would have to order.
Other parts you can get, but that part, the only way to get it is to order the module.
Yeah. Obviously, the parts that are non-orderable, they tend to be stuff that either won't break, won't go wrong, or if you've broken that, you've got some serious problems. It's
right. You need the module.
Yeah, you would never ever replace that arm itself. What you may replace is the motor that's attached to it, which, as you go through, you can see it's going through a convoluted section of belts and whistles and this sort of thing, and trying to work out where it actually goes to. And if you then break it apart, you can sort of see from there that goes through to that motor there, and that motor itself is non-orderable, but the one next to it is. So depending on what part of the function is broken, they just decided not to set up that motor. It may be a cost-effective thing, like I say, with the Rush and the Era products, because they are made to have, compared to our other fixtures, they're made to a very tight budget. So to us, the cost of the full module is relatively low. So yeah, a customer's not going to complain at a in fact, without double checking, I don't know what price this full module is, but I would probably say it's no more than $1,000 for this entire module. Whereas the same module for the Mac Encore, this one here, this full thing, I would probably say Harman would sell it to one of our distributors' customers for at least $2,500, which is why we obviously then, well, I can pretty much guarantee this single PCB is at least $400. So from a cost-effective point of view, you may as well just do the entire module. There's no point spending your physical time and labor, which obviously costs money as well, taking the thing apart, when you may as well just buy the entire module and slide it straight in. For the Mac products, yes, you do want to be able to take it all apart and spend time and labor doing it, because it's a $15,000 lighting fixture sort of thing. So the cheaper products that we do, yes, we give you less options for spare parts, but there is always an option. It may not be immediately obvious that it is cost effective to do that, but yeah, it would be the next level up. You would just have to buy the entire module to get the part that you want.
Again, just keep it kind of in expression. Is the pricing some type of cost multiplier or something? Sometimes I've noticed like where we try to do some cost multiplier, pretty soon like if someone wants to order a board and it's more than a unit.
Yes, this historically from a marketing point of view, I'm not entirely sure if Harman still do it exactly the same way, but I do know there was a cost multiplier for if we buy it in, then it's classed as a raw material. Even if we buy this module in from our JDM supplier, we've bought it in as a raw material spare part. It's an assembly, but we haven't made it. We haven't had any influence in the creation of that one part. So there is, for instance, a ×3 multiplier on what we've bought it for, ×3, that's what the end user would be purchasing it for. If we've made it in-house, so our guys in Petch on the production line have assembled this module, it's then like ×4.5 because of our input to it as well. And therefore, that's why some assemblies and things are, I would say stupid pricing. It seems stupid, but there is obviously that reason behind it. But yes, there is multipliers depending on the source of that part. If it was just a motor that we buy in, and we're shipping the customer just that motor, we're not having to do any adjustment to it. We're not adding any parts to it. It's just a motor, so it only has a ×3. If we were selling it as an assembly of the motor with a toothed wheel on the end of it, with the grub screw already tightened down at the correct height and torque measurements, that sort of thing, we've had influence. Therefore, it becomes a manufactured part again. So yes, it becomes.
How often is that a point of contention? May I ask? Does anybody know?
No.
Like,
We've had trouble more like with non-honorable piece of metal. They gotta buy the whole module.
yeah,
$600 module, the parts,
Like-
$15. That's that kind of thing. We get contention on that.
Yeah, obviously there are some parts that have gone through the system and somehow have gone just completely stupid because the initial cost price was calculated incorrectly, and of course that through the multipliers along the way has a massive knock-on effect and ends up being the wrong price. So obviously they do need questioning and adjusting, but most of the time they are, well, they do follow a formula. So yes, whatever we purchase them for, it then gets a cost multiplier to the distributors and obviously the end users and things as well. In EMEA, we have obviously our distribution network, which you don't use over there, but we do as part of the service agreements and things. Our distributors get a discount on parts for providing the service of doing their own repairs and things. Yeah. So we give them a price, which is the sort of the sales price to them, but they don't pay that. They get a discount on that. So sometimes the price is higher than it should be, but we give them a discount anyway. So we're still making money on it, obviously. Otherwise, Harman wouldn't be in business. But yeah, sometimes the costs are inflated a little bit, just to account for the fact that we're not going to be getting that money for it because of the discount through the service network. But then that way, the distributor or the dealer can also put their own percentage on to sell it, and obviously the end user can sometimes end up spending an absolute fortune on something that from a Harman point of view costs us maybe $20. The end user's paying nearly $1,000 for it, purely because of all the markup along the way. But yeah, that's obviously just the issue with distribution networks and markup along each individual stage. I know for a fact, obviously I'm actually based at the cement machine factory in the UK, so I'm from a manufacturing point of view, I know how much the factory purchase a certain part, like our fluid pump, for instance. And technically, the manufacturing plant at Louth is then a supplier to the spare parts warehouses. So the spare parts warehouses technically purchase the parts from the manufacturing plant, and there is a certain amount of markup there as well. So even internally, we are buying and selling parts around our own network, and the price is increasing at each stage. Which, yeah. Whether that's good or bad, it's just how it is. But obviously, the manufacturing plant at Louth is treated like it would be if you were purchasing a box of bolts or screws from your local
It's always
supplier. They are purely a supplier of that part.
10%. Like when we sell into Brazil and stuff, they mark it up a bit. They only pay us 10% more than it costs.
Maximum.
Yeah. Otherwise, you just send stuff online and sell it. Yeah.
So around in the circle.
Yeah. So,
Right.
but there is a massive difference in part prices between the JDM parts. Like for instance, like I say, this main module PCB that's on this ERA product, I would dare say would be about $200 or $300 at the most. For the equivalent for a Mac Ultra, you're probably looking $1,200 at least for the same function sort of PCB. Obviously, it does a lot more in the higher end units, and it's made of better quality components and that sort of thing. You are getting what you pay for, but for what is essentially doing the same function, the JDM products, the parts are a lot cheaper than anything that we produce internally, which is why, as I say, we are opting for telling you that you need to replace the entire module rather than just giving you the individual parts. You'll find for a lot of the Rush products and the ERA products, we don't give you any of the metal parts, any of the chassis parts internally, because if you're changing those, you've probably dropped the unit and you're maybe going to end up replacing a lot of the fixture anyway in individual parts. You may as well just replace the entire module. So it's sort of decisions like that have been made where we will not hold or stock or order any of the metal parts internally of the Rush fixtures because it's not cost effective for us to do so. It's not cost effective for you as a end user to spend your time taking this unit apart to that extent just to replace that. Because as you can see, there's a lot of parts that bolt onto it, so all these things are taking more and more time to actually get to the part that you need to replace. You may as well spend the extra $100, which would be 2 or 3 hours of your time. You may as well spend that and not waste your time and just replace the entire module. 5-minute job.
No screws or wire sets either, right? On the non-Martin.
Screws are a different subject. Historically, Martin have always supplied screws regardless of how common they are. More recent years, we are stopping any common screw that can be sourced locally. We will not be shipping M4x10 tap type screws around the world because you can get them at any hardware store locally. If it's a specialist screw that is something very hard to get hold of or even custom that we've had made, then yes, we will supply it as a spare part. But
okay, will it be on the parts finder?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what I'm currently doing, just as an example, one that I've just started doing specifically at request. Let me just quickly find it in my be created. The Mac Ultra wash head is one that I'm currently working on. And if I open that up, so this one I've not exploded it yet, but I'm just making it look. But what we're now doing is, rather than giving you the part number only, I'm going to be giving you, as you can probably see in the bottom left hand corner there, the friendly name as well, so the actual part name that you would see in SAP or CRM or Procom. So you get the part number and the description. Now for screws, because we're not going to be giving you the part number for screws because we don't want you ordering screws from us, what I am giving you is, like, if I hover over the screw there, you can see it gives you the size. So M5x20 button head Torx black is so it's the description, but it gives you the specs of that screw, so you can go off and find it locally.
Is that for Rush and ERA? Has that
it will be going forward? Yeah, this is the first one where I've done it this way. So this is we are working towards an update. Hopefully, maybe start of Q2 will be another update for 3D Parts Finder where we've corrected a lot of things, and some of the fixtures that are missing that we've released in the past year will also be in here as well. But yeah, this is it's not as easy to go back and historically change them, but obviously we will slowly do it. We have so far, we've been doing 3D Parts Finder for about 12 years now, from a marketing point of view, but then it went a bit quiet because I think the person that was doing them left the company and nobody was doing them. So I actually took them on to do myself, because I was doing the ones for the smoke machines only. And the person doing the lighting ones left, I believe, and no one else was doing them. So we've started a push to redo them, relaunch them, and bring them up to date. So it was just me, but now there's me, Rasmus, and Kim. I've been teaching them how to do it as well, so that I have other hands doing it rather than it just being for me. Because creating a model like this, obviously the model itself is created by R&D.
Yeah, is there something like the wire finder, which is used for Vipers? Is that going to be like a standardized thing across all the like the Rush and the Era? You know, the wire finder for the Viper. Hello.
Safety lost audio.
Wait a second. Yeah, he's doing all this stuff. He's updating us.
Yeah.
I learned from him. I have to send emails to Denmark.
The friendly name thing is gonna be real helpful.
That's good, because I have to send emails to get the specs.
Yeah.
The screw spec being right there, that's great.
Yeah.
And then the wire finder, I'm trying to ask him about that, like what's he got planned? Because the Rush and the Era, the wire sets, people ask about that. The Viper is easy to get, the other ones unknown.
Yeah.
I have to send emails on specific parts to these guys. I guess it's him, I don't know if he answered all the.
Gary? Oh, there he is.
I'm back in. I don't know what happened there. My WebEx just died completely.
Yeah. When you log off. Yeah, Gary, I had a question about the wire finders, how the Vipers have that wire finder thing, which is great. Are the other models going to have that, like Rush and Era, or some kind of standardized way to find wire sets?
Yeah, well, depending on the age of the content, sorry, for some reason I'm not sharing. Here we go. Depending on the age of the content when it was created, depends on what we have available at the time. So things like the Mac Viper, for instance, has a wire finder. The Aura has a wire finder, which obviously is a PDF file.
Yeah, those are great. Is that going to be across all the models or not really?
No, they stopped doing those. Again, this is as people have left the company or moved on to different things. The knowledge of how they were done or who should be doing them also disappeared with them, because obviously it's not something that us as tech support would do. This should be from product management through the R&D team at the time of creation.
Right.
So obviously, me, Rasmus, and Kim, we're not trained for doing those sort of things. I mean, I've had to teach myself how to make these things because there was no one else doing them. I mean, in theory, R&D could do them, but obviously they're too busy doing R&D things. So, but yeah, so the actual 3D Parts Finder, sorry, the wire finders, they were done for a period, but then not. So what we are tending to be done, let me go back to go into the archive. So what we are trying to do,
Never lets knowledge get away. Come on.
I'm assuming you can still see my screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thankfully in R&D, someone has now decided to be putting wires in the actual models, which they never did before. So this seems to be going forward. They are doing this. So as I was to break this apart, we have the physical layout of the wires, as you can probably see down here to the sensors and things like that. So now these, as far as I'm concerned, become a part, which I can do a part like that. So some of the newer models do have wires in the 3D model. So I can then just use that, and obviously you hover over it and you get a part number. So as you can see from this one, it's just a part number. It doesn't tell you what it is. But obviously that's that's changing as I'm adding the descriptions. But obviously, most of these are just like this one. This one would be yoke wire 1. This one would be yoke wire 2, and yoke wire 3. So they still don't tell you a great deal, but at least you can physically say, right, well, that's the one that connects that sensor to, that PCB, for instance. So if I was to go back one image, there we go. So again, I can look and see where that wire goes. So if someone was trying to explain, it's the wire that connects those two little sensor PCBs, well, that means that one then. So I can physically track that with the customer to sort of see what they're talking about. And if it's in the model, I can obviously find out what the part number is and order it from there. So again, if the wire isn't available, it may still be in the model, but it may show up as non-audible item, or it may even say, let me think of one that would do that.
So this started with the Ultra, right? Everything before that's not going to have that wire thing.
A couple of them will, a couple of them won't. It depends on how soon after MPI I made the model. Making something like this. The Ultra wash head that I showed you, well, I haven't exploded it yet. They come to us from R&D. They come multicolored, like this one, for instance, here. This top cover will be pink, the chassis will be blue, the handle will be red. Just so, from an R&D point of view, they can instantly see the different panels in lots of different colours, so you know exactly what you're looking at. So I technically colour these in to make them look like the real thing, and then I have to name every single part to be the correct part number, because it may have prototype part numbers or even no part number, but it has a description, and the description is different to how we've got it in Procom. So creating these things is like a 2 or 3 stage process of naming all the parts, grouping them all together, making them look the right colour. Then we get onto, and now how does it come apart? How do we explode it? What stages do I want to give you as your starting points? And that Ultra wash head that I showed you, where it hadn't been exploded yet, but it had been coloured in, I've named all the parts on that, and so far it's taken me about 18 hours to get to that stage. So they're quite a long process to sort of get through. So some of them might end up being like this one here. I simply have information at the bottom here which says full wire set. So I'm not showing you the wires in the model because they weren't in the model, but that's the information I can give you, so I'm putting it there. So there's depending on when they were made as to what information we had available at the time. If it's in the model, then hopefully I can give you the part number within the model. If it's not in the model, I will try and give you some information still within this file, but no visual representation of where these wires go.
Full wire set works as a, if it's orderable as a full wire set, that'll solve the problem.
Exactly. So certain items, like the smoke machines, are quite simple. So rather than giving individual wires, we just give you the full wire set, because there's only about 15 wires, in the entire thing. Whereas a moving head, you've got multiple, and they're all black as well, which is always amusing. So trying to work out which ones they are. So yeah, so some of them will just give you a full wire set. Some of the Rush products, the smaller, simpler Rush products, will be a full wire set with one part number. Again, obviously, sometimes there's a 120-volt version, depending on the mains cable or the requirements for the US market. But most of the internal wires will be the same, same looms and things. But yeah, so we are trying to give you information if it's available at the time. Some may not historically, because again, there's no visual representation in the model, and it may have a wire finder, in which case we don't need to give you it. But going forward, we have sort of tried to standardize what information can we give you in one single place, i.e. the 3D parts finder. Can we give you the wires? Can we show you where they go so that you can find them that way, rather than just saying it's the one that connects the yoke to the base? We can show you where in the base does it connect to, which PCB, which socket does it go to. So again, from a service and technical point of view, it's not just a part finding tool, it's a visual representation of the fixture without having a physical fixture in front of you. Especially currently, as I'm currently sat at home, so I have no fixtures here at all. but I have virtual fixtures that I can work with if my brain is failing me on that particular description of where things are. Yeah. One of the other things that we're starting to do as well with 3D Parts Finder, because the models are so good now, when we started, we tried to make them as small as possible because obviously hardware-wise, internet bandwidth, trying to download files and things when we started was quite poor, whereas now we're onto gigabit networking and all sorts, so we can move larger files a lot faster, even downloading them through your phone and that sort of thing. We can get much larger chunks of information a lot faster without fear of it taking an hour to download. So now we can give you more information in a larger file. So we are starting to make slightly more complicated models with more information in them, which obviously has a side effect of making the file size larger, but it's not as much of an issue in today's technological era compared to 10 years ago, when trying to download a 200 megabyte file would take you 15 minutes, whereas now it can take seconds. So yeah, we are making larger file sizes, but with more information in that file, so that you're only downloading the one file and you get everything, rather than having to download multiple files and trying to cross-reference between a wire finder and a schematic and that sort of thing. But yeah, one of the things I was going to say is service manuals. Rasmus has done a test so far, but obviously any service manual that we create from tech support side of things is me, Rasmus and Kim are setting up photo studios and taking things apart and taking photos, and sometimes it's hard to try and show in a photo exactly what we're trying to do. So what Rasmus has tried, I can't remember which model it is he's used, but he's done one recently where he used the 3D Parts Finder to literally explode and things like that. He's manipulating on demand and then taking a screenshot so that he can highlight things like that, so that we haven't got a Word document with some dodgy arrows that don't quite align anymore because if someone's made it a PDF and the formatting has gone a bit weird. He can show exactly what he needs to show. He can even sort of make things completely see-through. I mean, one of the things you can do, I sort of mentioned it in the test file. If you hover over an item and press tab, you can make it ghosted. So it doesn't explode the model. You can now see through the lid and see how things are built. So we can sort of do this, and we can look through items and show that in a better representation of what we want to show than a photo can show, because a photo will be hard to manipulate to get that exact information, whereas here we can just highlight things, and as soon as I move off of the model, the lid comes back again. So you can see how things go together, because if I was to click on that, it would explode it, which is I can't see how this fluid pump sat in there because the lid was on. So I can make it disappear and I can see how it goes together. So they're not just parts finders, they are service tools as well. Good for virtually taking something apart or seeing how things line up. But yeah, so we call them a 3D Parts Finder because that's what we're primarily using for, but we are slowly using them for training purposes, service manual, representation, diagrams, that sort of thing. So yeah, we're investing more time into doing these rather than just leaving me to do it as and when I can. It's becoming a bigger thing now, which is good because they are very useful tools to have. But yeah, so at every aspect of the service and support, whether it be parts, tech support, even R&D, come back to the 3D Parts Finders because they load faster and they're easier to manipulate than loading their original fully spec models in SolidWorks. So they are useful for many, many purposes. Yeah.
All right. Any questions?
Still have a million.
You know, obviously quite a lot of information there, but like I say, obviously the good thing about these is you can't break this model. No matter what you do, you cannot break it. You know, if anything goes wrong and, you know, you've got to a stage where you sort of zoomed in on something, you don't know what you're doing, you can just click on any of these and it just resets your view back to where you know, so if you ever get lost, the way we sort of do, I mean, this is a good example where this being the top level view, this is your home view. As you start to go through and explode things, you'll see I'm giving you the last view in the top corner. So as you know, if you click on the heater, for instance, I've then got that last view just there. So you can jump to either of these at any given point. So you haven't got to sort of work your way backwards step by step. You can just launch yourself back to the main view. Or you can even use these as shortcuts. So I know I want to look at the remote control. Well, I know that one is the remote control, so I can just launch straight to that one, and it just shows me the remote control. And now I can look through this and say, right, that's that part number. So you haven't got to explode through the entire model. You can shortcut and go exactly where you need to go. And at any given point, you can go back one level or two levels. Say, well, that's where that sits. That's where it goes. That's how it interacts with that. So yeah, there's nothing you can do here to actually break this model. If anything does go wrong with it, you can just go to the zip file and just reload it. Yeah, so there's not a great deal more I can sort of say about that. Like I say, obviously some of them you can see are, you know, 3 megabyte sizes for a smoke machine, but as you go into entertainment lighting, for instance, the Aura PXL is a full model in one, and that's 21 megabytes, which doesn't sound like a great deal, I say, by today's standards of file size. You know, I've got Excel files bigger than that now, but this one here is, because it's a physically small fixture, we have the entire fixture in one physical file, as opposed to splitting it, because it's not that complicated. But as you can see, I'm starting to add a lot more detail to these because, again, I've worked out how to do so as I've been learning this. I've even got all the warning labels and things on the model. So again, you can take screenshots of this to show to someone, and they are seeing what you're seeing. You know, as I come round, you've got the display is lit up, and if I was to click on that and the base assembly, there's the base assembly, and I sort of go in there, and yeah, you can have a good look around and see how it actually goes, and it should, in theory, look like you have just taken it apart. So the full display assembly, you can purchase the full assembly as it is there. Everything in this picture is that part number, is under that part number, or you can individually get just the part number, and you can sort of jump back. But yeah, I'm aiming for it as realistic as possible, so that they can be, you know, visually exactly what you would see in the real world. For future projects of service manuals and things, like I say, we can just screenshot from that, and I think there's even a button here where you can just take that screenshot and just save it straight out, and it just takes whatever view you've currently got. The white area becomes a JPEG, so you can just export pictures on demand. It's a very powerful tool that can be used for all manner of things, and say even just sending a screenshot where you would normally have to go and take a photo of something to send to a customer, you can just bring it up in here and just say, right, this is what we've got, send them a screenshot from there and just save it as a JPEG, send them to that and say, right, highlight which piece you want. And they can then just, you know, draw a ring around wherever that they want. You can bring it back here and say, right, it's that fan. There's my part number. Yeah.
Yeah, so if the customer has 3D Parts Finder, they can do that, take a screenshot of the highlighted part, right?
They can.
Probably part of themselves with that one.
Yeah, obviously, if they highlight it and sort of say, right, well, I've got the part number there, obviously just order the part number. But if they highlight it and it says non-orderable item or something like that, or it has no part number showing up, because this bottom line here, you can actually hide it, and sometimes that one there. There we go. Yeah, so sometimes the default installation doesn't include the status bar. So hovering over this, I don't see the text in the bottom corner, which when we first started making this, I thought, that's brilliant. You don't see the wrong part numbers or the wrong information. But then I reinstalled it later, and if I right click there, I got the status bar, which means I now have text in the bottom corner. And we had customers that were looking at parts and ordering the wrong part number. Things like main PCBs, for instance. If I actually go to the base again, in fact, let me go to the module here. Something like this here, it may have the wrong part number because it'll have the production part number in the bottom left-hand corner, but as a spare part, it's a different part number because it comes pre-configured with software, which makes it a new part number. So I'm showing you in the middle section the part number I want you to order, but customers are looking in the bottom left-hand corner and ordering the sort of raw board without software. And through some fate or something, that part number is actually available for purchase for some reason. So they're purchasing the wrong part, they're receiving the wrong part. Obviously, we're trying to mitigate and avoid that now, but it has been known that people have ordered the wrong part number and received that exact part number, and it has arrived with no firmware on it, and they can't load firmware because the bootloader doesn't exist, that sort of thing, because it hasn't been through the production process of that part needed. So we're trying to ship you a fully configured, calibrated, correct firmware or latest firmware version part that you can just plug and play, but they haven't received that because they've looked at the wrong place to get the information. So this is why we're trying to correct that bottom left-hand corner information. But that's an inherent issue with the software. Nothing to do with the actual model itself. It's just the software itself that happens to do that. But now I know it does that. I can work around it by adding that non-audible item text. I know where to add that to make it show.
Hey, Gary, within SolidWorks, is there a way to do like searches? So say somebody gave a part number, is there a way to turn around and look it up if you know which model you're looking at?
In the Composer creation software, yes, but in this player, no.
Okay.
Sounds like every customer should have this installed and just take a screenshot and circle if they want.
No. Sadly, it doesn't do that. There is no search, and it'll zoom in to that part and highlight that part. You sadly can't do that from this player. Like I say, the Composer does, but the Composer, like I say, it has all the background information as well, which we don't want the customers to be touching and accessing, and you can start deleting things.
Just based on IP stuff.
It should be reinstated to public access.
Yeah, so we're working on some stuff as far as the trained dealers and that kind of stuff here in the US. We are giving them access to be able to use this. So
yeah, again, this is where we've got the issue of the way EMEA does things compared to the US. Obviously, EMEA, we have the distribution network, and we give the distributors access at a partner level login, whereas obviously your guys over there, they're not set up to be that level. They may have an account, but they're not a partner account like we have in EMEA. So most of these things, like the service manuals, for instance, on the asset site, you need to be at partner level to get to the asset site to be able to see schematics and service manuals.
So that's something that O'Neill and I are working on as far as determining who should qualify to.
Yeah, so this is obviously I know you're currently, well, we did recently when we started working at Addict, because this 3D Parts Finder was historically on the Martin.com support page, but the support page has become a place where we don't put anything technical up there anymore. Obviously, there's currently existing historical documents up there, but the asset site and obviously now the knowledge base as well are the two locations where we want to be putting the information. So we had the 3D Parts Finder sort of moved from Martin.com over to the assets site, but the assets site obviously wasn't brilliant for searching and that sort of thing. So I also put it onto the knowledge base because then I have control over version control. I can update it and replace it and change and that sort of thing. The asset side, I obviously still need to make a request for it to be uploaded there, and we had a couple of issues there as well of version control. So now the 3D Parts Finder is no longer on the asset side; it's only on the knowledge base.
Yeah, it was on the public part of the knowledge base, and
Yeah.
that went away.
At
It's
first,
not no
it was
longer,
on the public. Yeah, well, this is because
it's
initially,
no longer public. Yeah.
when it was on Martin.com, it was behind a login for technician level. We had we had 2 levels on Martin.com.
You're right. Okay, then it got moved to the knowledge base. It was public, and now it's not public anymore.
Yeah.
The knowledge base.
Yeah, so now the knowledge base still has 2 levels, but rather than it being, Martin.com had 3 levels. There was technician level, which was any service partner that we deemed relevant to see schematics and things. We had partner level, and then we had internal. The knowledge base only has partner and internal, and obviously public. So we've lost a level, an intermediate level there, where the approved partners or distribution level, and obviously major account holders like Christie Lights, that sort of thing, where we want to give them more information than the average dealer. We've lost that level of login. So initially I made the 3D Parts Finder public on the 3D Parts Finder, to help the US guys, because obviously you didn't have anyone logging in at that level.
Yeah.
But after discussion with Rasmus and Kim and a couple of the product managers, we did decide to go to put it behind a login again, like it was originally on Martin.com, but the plan being that we allow more people access to it on the knowledge base side, because obviously having a partner level account on the knowledge base side isn't giving you a partner level account on the asset side, so you aren't seeing all the service manuals and that sort of thing. And obviously you aren't treated in SAP as a different level account, spending amounts, that sort of thing. So it is purely access to the knowledge base level that we wanted to open up to more people. So as you say, some of your approved accounts and customers should be able to log into knowledge base at what we're currently calling partner level, because we're trusting them with that information. So yeah, currently it is at partner level on knowledge base again. Yeah.
Depending on how you'll do your job. So you get an inquiry that comes in, someone's asking for some part number, it's a Martin dealer, and would we say, hey, do you have access to the 3D part file?
Yes.
And he says, no, I don't. How do I get that?
Yeah, well, this is sort of where, obviously, from the US market side of things, is an argument of simply giving them a login to the knowledge base. I know it's often not simply, but simply giving them a login, and that gives them access to your preferred accounts, the people that you want to give that access to, and not just anybody public-wise. I mean,
oh, no doubt. We're just trying to figure out, like, that seems like a logical progression.
Yeah, what O'Neill said.
Like,
It used to be everybody could have this, right, Gary?
Yeah.
I mean, on the Martin site or on the knowledge base, but now it's not everybody can have this.
3D Parts Finder is a bit of a grey area as far as who should and who shouldn't see it, because obviously we're not giving any information away. Technically, it is a 100% accurate scale model. So competitors, for instance, could take this and do it. There's no measurements in the file, but they could easily do it.
That's the market. Circling things.
Yeah, so, I mean, what we're trying to do is, O'Neill and I are trying to get on the front end of this.
Yeah.
And not be a ad hoc, one by one sort of decision.
Like, here's the this.
We're gonna come up with the 20 dealers or whatever that are trained, that we know they can turn around and handle this.
Yep.
They're doing their own repairs already, that kind of thing. So we're trying to get on the front end, so it won't be a one by one sort of choice.
Right.
We're
just trying to simplify the parts thing.
Flagged or any, like, some indicator of as such, or? Because then, you start asking, like, hey, do you have access to this tool, this really cool tool that you
Say
don't
no,
have?
go out and say no.
They said, no, I don't, but how do I get it?
Yeah, and now I know, but I have to have it now.
Not for you.
That's typically right.
Yeah.
Well, we've also got
yeah.
as far as version control, and that's what obviously the 3D Parts Finder is what it is. Obviously, it is a version controlled tool, and even some of our own internal Harman people are using older revisions because they didn't know there was newer revisions, and of course, it's only because they got a copy from somebody that had a earlier version. So obviously, it's an offline tool. So you download the files, you download the software, and you run it locally. So you don't need internet access to get the models. You initially grab them, and then they are yours. So even if you're in the deepest, darkest cave sort of thing, you can still look at your part lists. So having the updates and things as well, it's trying to bring some document control to it, so that we haven't got older versions circling the internet, being posted on forums, that sort of thing. Which obviously it currently happens that if you do a search for it, there are earlier versions on random forums because some lighting guy somewhere got one off of some guy that he knows. It's like, oh, this tool's amazing, sort of thing. Again, we've got no control over that. Whereas if we are obviously hosting it first of all from a login perspective, we are then encouraging that person to come back to check that they've got the latest version. They aren't just taking it and running with it and not coming back to verify, because obviously each new revision we release as well, I've got a big long list Excel file where I'm going through some of the older models as well, whether it be current sellable models or even some of the historic ones that we do still support as far as parts goes. If a customer says, I tried ordering this part, but the part number's wrong, for instance, we've got a thing with the, I think it's the Aura PXL or something, where we're putting an X at the end of service part numbers now. So the 3D Parts Finder is going to have to be updated to include that new part number. So as we're finding errors, whether or not it's now got an M in front of it, which quite a few of the Martin parts now do, because when we joined Harman, some of the JBL part numbers clashed with the Martin part numbers. So they decided to put random ones that clashed. The Martin ones now have an M in front of them, but the 3D Parts Finder doesn't show that. It shows the original without the prefix of M. So we're having that got to go into the model, update the model to include the M now, because we found that the model was wrong and we haven't updated it yet. So we're slowly working through the updates as well.
Hey Gary, are you doing all the Parts Finder stuff? You're doing everything?
Yes.
He said he's getting Rasmussen Kim involved now, but we're going to end up having to wrap this. We've gone a little bit over time at this point.
This part?
Yeah, this part of it.
Yeah,
Move around and get on with it.
What I will say though,
Gary,
as part of the 3D Parts Finder, just briefly, one of the things you'll get is there is a PDF file in there, which is also available separately, which shows you the actual, that's the wrong screen. Come over here, which shows you which models are in that file. I say we've got two files, the legacy and the current. So this shows you which ones are in which without having to open and go through it all. But you also get a change log that I've started adding as well. So it shows you what has changed as far as new fixtures, but also what part numbers have been changed as well. So
where's the change log? Where's the change?
That comes in the zip file. The zip file contents are these four folders.
That's
one folder, three files. So the actual, when you download the zip file from the help center, when you unpack it, you get this folder structure here. So the actual folder of content, which is all the 3D files themselves, which, as I say, as go in there, you've got the different categories. But then you've got the what is in it, what the changelog is, and then the README file is actually, there's a knowledge base article, which is this exact, how to download the Composer Player, how to basically how to navigate. But obviously this was made a fair few years ago now, so we've now got this file that you guys are currently, I've lost it again. Yeah, the file with the era in.
So
practically tell you.
So the viewer from the Salt we're gonna keep having access to that indefinitely, right? Because that viewers comes from the company.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. It does get updates as well. So there are various versions, but if we find that certain features don't work in a newer version, I will have to go back and remake that. Whether it's a case of just tweaking a few things like variables in the setting for a part, has it made all of these opaque now because of an update they've made? I'll have to go and redo them all, but that's just a quick update. But yeah, obviously there are various versions. I think I'm on 2020 is the version I'm on. I think there's a 2022 version now as well.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, but in theory, it should just work. It's still free of charge. So
Right. They might start charging for it or have to be licensed or something.
if they do, then we'll have to visit that as and when they do and try and work out a way of doing it. I'm assuming they'll keep a legacy version going for free, just with no updates, in which case we'll just make it to that version.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully we're fairly future-proof with this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
That's okay. If you have any questions, ask and I shall answer.
A million of them.
I'm gonna go stop the recording.
Okay, cool. Dave, you're right. The moment you say this tool is there, they want.
Yeah.
I gotta be careful.
Then it just causes the friction thing, right?
Then why am I being denied?
Hey, Gary, you send emails out when you update the KB,
So,
if you
exactly right.
made a new revision of the files?
No.
If they have, say that.
Yeah.
In theory, a new version of 3D Parts Finder, something that we're currently working on, is putting it into one of the Martin newsletters that gets banded around from the sales department, where they say there's new fixtures coming out or there's new firmware versions. We'll add it to that Martin monthly newsletter, whatever it is. So if there is a new version, it will get announced, definitely. It's just obviously who is the recipient of that. Obviously, is then governed by how far that information spreads. But obviously, what I will do as well before that announcement, I will do it's something like I've done recently with the end-of-life service support for the German Glaciator Extreme. We've now, that's gone past its 5 years. We don't support parts anymore, but we don't have an official process actively working where that filters through and gets announced by product managers and that sort of thing. So I've been doing an email myself to the relevant service leads in the regions like O'Neill, Gary, we're doing it to the UK guys, the APAC guys, the India guys, just so there is an announcement of a pending end of life, and they obviously spread that information within their own networks. That will obviously now be followed by an official regional email shot to whoever, but that's obviously taken, obviously in the UK, it's Ben Payne that's done that for EMEA. He's then gone on and done his own email shot to the EMEA customers to spread the word outside of Harman. We'll do the same with the 3D Parts Finder. So if there is an update about to be released, I will inform the same people that there is a new update, and what they do with it within their own network and region. Obviously, they can go on and tell the sales guys or the marketing guys or whatever, and hopefully it'll then get spread to your customers through whatever means of media you want to do so, whether it's an email monthly shot or whether it's on Twitter or whatever. However they want to do that in their region, they can spread the word that there is a new version active and published, ready to go. It's all yours. But yeah, sadly, there's nothing from the knowledge base itself where I can trigger what's been updated yet.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, right. I shall leave you guys to it.
Okay, thanks, Gary.
Right. Any questions? I'm here, so just email, call, whatever.
You gonna do that?
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Did you guys have a time limit?